The morning I discovered my husband's mistress had not only moved into our Aspen vacation home, but was posting photos of herself in my grandmother's rocking chair on Instagram, I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I simply smiled and reached for the metal box hidden behind the winter coats in our Denver home closet, the one Richard never knew existed. Inside lay a document that would change everything. The original deed to that cabin, in my name alone. A gift from my father before I ever met Margaret Thompson. She thought she'd won the grand prize. But Brenda Walsh was about to learn that some victories are just beautifully wrapped defeats. But before we dive deeper into how I reclaimed not just my property but my entire life, tell me where you're tuning in from today. And if this story touches something in your heart, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. My name is Margaret Thompson, though everyone calls me Maggie, and for 35 years, I believed I had built the perfect life in Denver's Cherry Creek neighborhood. Our two-story Colonial with its manicured lawn and rose garden was the envy of the neighborhood. Richard's law practice thrived downtown, and our daughter Jessica had given us 2 beautiful grandchildren. To the outside world, we were living the American dream. But dreams have a funny way of revealing themselves as mirages when you finally wake up. It started 3 months ago on an ordinary Tuesday morning. Richard was reading the newspaper at our kitchen island while I prepared his usual breakfast: 2 eggs over medium, whole wheat toast, and black coffee. The September sun streamed through our bay windows, casting long shadows across the marble. Countertops I'd spent weeks selecting 20 years ago. I was arranging fresh flowers from our garden when Richard cleared his throat in that particular way that always preceded an announcement. After 35 years of marriage, you learn to recognize these subtle warnings, like distant thunder before a storm. "Margaret," he said, using my full name, which he only did when discussing serious matters. "I've been thinking about the cabin. Our Aspen cabin had been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather built it with his own hands in 1952. A modest but sturdy structure nestled among towering pines with a view of the Elk Mountains that could steal your breath. My father had gifted it to me the year before I married Richard, insisting it remain in my name alone. Every woman needs something that's just hers," he'd said, pressing the deed into my hands with a knowing look that I was too young and in love to fully understand. "What about the cabin?" I asked, trimming the stems of a particularly beautiful dahlia. "It's sitting empty most of the year. Seems like such a waste." Richard folded his newspaper with practiced precision. "I was thinking we could rent it. Out. Generate some income." Something in his tone made my hands still. In all our years together, Richard had never shown interest in the cabin's financial potential. He'd always dismissed it as a quaint family relic, preferring luxury resorts to what he called roughing it in Aspen. "We don't need the money," I said carefully, watching his reflection in the window. "It's not about need, Margaret. It's about being practical. That property is worth a fortune now. We should capitalize on it." I turned to face him, noting how he avoided my eyes. "We've never discussed renting the cabin before. Why now?" He shrugged, a gesture that seemed too casual for the conversation. "Just makes sense. I could have my assistant handle the details." His assistant, Brenda Walsh, 32 years old, with long auburn hair and a laugh that tinkled through the law firm's hallways like wind chimes. I'd met her at last year's company Christmas party, where she'd hung on Richard's every word while fetching him drinks and touching his arm whenever she made a point. I'd dismissed my unease then, telling myself I was being paranoid. After all, Richard was 65, successful, and had never given me reason to doubt him. "I'll think about it," I said, though I had no intention of renting out my family's cabin. "Don't think too long," Richard said, standing and straightening his tie. "Market's hot right now." He kissed my cheek, a dry, perfunctory gesture, and left for the office. I stood in my sunny kitchen, surrounded by the life I'd carefully curated, and felt the first crack appear in my perfect facade. The following weeks brought more cracks. Richard began working later, taking calls in his study with the door closed, and showing an unusual interest in his appearance. He bought new suits, started using cologne again, and even joined a gym. When I commented on these changes, he brushed them off as maintaining professional standards. Jessica noticed too. During our weekly lunch at the Brown Palace Hotel, she studied her father's transformation with narrowed eyes. "Dad's acting weird," she said, stabbing at her Cobb salad. "David thinks he's having some kind of midlife crisis." "He's 65, I pointed out. "Bit late for midlife." "You know what I mean, Mom? The new clothes, the gym membership. He's even talking about getting his teeth whitened." She leaned forward, lowering her voice. "You don't think he's, having an affair?" I finished for her. The words felt foreign in my mouth, like speaking a language I'd never learned. "Your father? Please." But the seed was planted. I began noticing things I'd previously overlooked. Receipts for restaurants I'd never visited. Charges for jewelry that never appeared on my wrists. Phone calls that sent him hurrying from the room. And always mentions of his assistant Brenda. The truth revealed itself on a rainy October afternoon. Richard had left his laptop open on his desk while he showered, and I'd gone to his study to water the plants. His email was open, and there it was. A message from Brenda with the subject line, "Can't wait for this weekend?" My hands trembled as I read their exchange. They were planning to spend the weekend at our Aspen cabin. Our cabin. The place where I'd spent childhood summers learning to fish with my grandfather, where Richard and I had honeymooned, where Jessica had taken her, first steps on the worn pine floors. "I've arranged everything," Brenda had written. "The champagne, the strawberries, that special lingerie you like. It'll be perfect." Richard's reply made my stomach churn. "You always know exactly what I want. Can't believe it took me this long to find someone who truly understands me." I stood there, rain pattering against the windows, reading months of correspondence between my husband and his mistress. They'd been meeting at hotels, taking long lunches, planning a future that didn't include me. And now they were planning to defile my family's cabin with their affair. But it was Richard's final email that transformed my hurt into something harder, sharper. "Don't worry about Margaret. She's so preoccupied with her garden club and grandchildren, she'd never notice if I moved you into the cabin permanently. Besides, the old place needs someone young and vibrant to bring it back to life." Old place. Someone young and vibrant. As if our cabin, my cabin, was just another tired relic to be discarded and replaced. I closed the laptop and walked calmly to our bedroom. Richard was still in the shower, humming something cheerful and off-key. I went to my closet, pushed aside the winter coats, and retrieved the metal box my father had given me decades ago. Inside, wrapped in tissue paper, lay the original deed to the cabin. My name alone was on that document, a fact Richard had apparently forgotten in his arrogance. I made copies of the deed that afternoon, stored them in various locations, and began planning. If Richard wanted to play games with property and ownership, I would show him how the game was really played. The weekend came. Richard left Friday afternoon, claiming he had a legal conference in Colorado Springs. I smiled, kissed his cheek, and told him to drive safely. As soon as his Mercedes disappeared around the corner, I called Carol Martinez, my best friend since college. "Pack a bag," I told her. "We're going to Aspen." "Now? Maggie, what's going on?" "I'll explain on the way. Just trust me." Carol had been through her own divorce 5 years earlier and recognized the tone in my voice. Within an hour, we were on I-70, heading west toward the mountains. The 3-hour drive gave me time to tell her everything. The emails, the affair, Richard's plans to install his mistress in my family's cabin. "That bastard," Carol muttered, gripping the steering wheel of her SUV. "What's the plan?" "Simple," I said, watching the aspens flash by in golden blurs. "I'm going to introduce myself to Brenda, and show her who really owns that cabin. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. We arrived in Aspen as the sun was setting, painting the mountains in shades of pink and purple. The cabin sat at the end of a winding dirt road, its log walls glowing warmly in the fading light. Richard's Mercedes was parked in the driveway, alongside a red BMW I didn't recognize. Brenda's, no doubt. Lights blazed from every window. Through the large picture window, I could see movement. Richard pouring wine, Brenda laughing, her hand on his shoulder. They'd built a fire in the stone fireplace my grandfather had constructed stone by stone. My grandmother's hand-quilted throw was draped across the sofa where Brenda sat, looking every inch the lady of the manor. "You sure about this?" Carol asked. I pulled the deed from my purse. "Absolutely." We walked to the front door. My front door, and I used my key to enter. The look on Richard's face when he saw me was almost worth every moment of pain. He jumped up, spilling red wine across the antique rug my mother had brought back from Turkey. "Margaret, what are you— this isn't—" Brenda rose too, her perfectly made-up face shifting from confusion to defiance. She was beautiful, I'd give her that. Tall and willowy where I was short and increasingly soft around the edges. Her designer dress probably cost more than my entire wardrobe. "You must be Brenda," I said pleasantly. "I'm Maggie Thompson, the actual owner of this cabin." She looked at Richard, who was turning an interesting shade of purple. "Richard, what is she talking about?" I held up the deed. "This property belongs to me. Has since before I married Richard. It was a gift from my father, and it's never been marital property." I smiled at her shocked expression. "I'm afraid you're trespassing." Richard tried to compose himself, straightening his shoulders in that way he did when preparing to argue a case. "Margaret, this is highly inappropriate. You can't just barge in here." "Barge in?" I interrupted, my voice steady despite the tremor in my hands. "Into my own property?" I turned to Brenda, who was clutching her wine glass like a shield. "Did Richard tell you this was his cabin? That he owned it?" Brenda's perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together. "He said it was a family property, that you never used it anymore." "Interesting." I walked further into the room, Carol close behind me. The cabin smelled of expensive perfume and wood smoke, with an underlying scent of the lavender sachets I'd placed in the closets last spring. "What else did he tell you?" "Margaret, stop this nonsense," Richard snapped. "We can discuss this privately." "Oh, I think Brenda deserves to know the truth, don't you?" I ran my hand along the smooth pine mantle my grandfather had carved. "This cabin has been in my family for 3 generations. My grandfather built it in 1952 using lumber from these very mountains. Every beam, every stone in this fireplace was placed by his hands." Brenda shifted uncomfortably, her confidence visibly wavering. She looked around the room as if seeing it for the first time. The family photos on the walls, the handmade curtains my mother had sewn, the collection of vintage skis mounted above the doorway. "My father gave me this cabin the year before I married Richard," I continued, unfolding the deed. "He insisted it stay in my name alone. Every woman needs something that's just hers," he said. "Wise man, my father." Richard's jaw worked silently. I could see him calculating, searching for an angle, a legal argument to turn this situation in his favor. But we both knew the truth. The cabin was mine, had always been mine, and no amount of lawyerly maneuvering could change that. "I don't understand," Brenda said, her voice smaller now. "Richard, you said—" "He says a lot of things," I cut in. "Did he tell you about the summer our daughter Jessica learned to swim in the lake behind this cabin? Or about the Christmas, when the power went out and we spent 3 days playing board games by candlelight? Did he mention that my grandmother died in the bedroom upstairs, in the bed you've probably been sleeping in?" Brenda's face paled. She set her wine glass down with a sharp click. "Margaret, that's enough," Richard growled. "This is between us." "No, Richard. You made it about more than us when you brought her here." I gestured around the room. "To my family's home. To the place where I scattered my father's ashes beneath the pine tree outside the kitchen window." Brenda grabbed her purse, her hands shaking. "I think I should go." "Brenda, wait!" Richard reached for her arm, but she pulled away. "No, Richard. This isn't what I thought." She looked at me, and for a moment, I saw something like shame in her eyes. "I'm sorry. I didn't know." "Of course you didn't," I said, not unkindly. Richard has a way of omitting important details. She gathered her things quickly, a weekend bag, a coat, her laptop. Richard followed her to the door, speaking in urgent whispers, but she shook her head firmly. Through the window, I watched her get into her red BMW and drive away, taillights disappearing into the mountain darkness. Richard turned back to face me, his carefully constructed composure crumbling. "Are you happy now? You've humiliated me." "I've humiliated you?" I laughed, but there was no humor in it. "You brought your mistress to my family's cabin, planned to install her here like some kept woman, and I've humiliated you?" Carol stepped forward. "I think I'll wait in the car, Maggie. Give you two some privacy." "No," I said quickly. "Please stay. I want a witness for what comes next." Richard's eyes narrowed. "What are you talking about?" I pulled out my phone and showed him the screenshots I'd taken of his emails with Brenda. "I have copies of everything. Every message, every receipt, every hotel charge. My lawyer has them too." "Your lawyer?" His voice cracked slightly. "Thomas Chen. You know him, I believe. Didn't he beat you in that property dispute last year?" Richard sank onto the sofa, his head in his hands. "Margaret, please. We can work this out." "Can we?" I walked to the window, looking out at the mountains bathed in moonlight. "Tell me, Richard, when exactly did I become so disposable to you? Was it gradual, or did you wake up one morning and decide your wife of 35 years was just another asset to trade in for a newer model?" "It's not like that," he mumbled. "Then what is it like? Explain it to me. Help me understand how the man who stood in this very room on our wedding night, promising to cherish me forever, could plan to replace me with his secretary." He looked up, and for a moment, I saw a flash of the young lawyer I'd fallen in love with. Brilliant, passionate, seemingly devoted. "Margaret, I got lost somewhere. The pressure at the firm, getting older, feeling like life was passing me by." "So you decided to have an affair with a woman half your age? That was your solution?" She made me feel young again, vital, like I still mattered. "And I didn't?" He couldn't meet my eyes. "You were always so capable, so self-sufficient. The house, the garden, the grandchildren. You never seemed to need me." I stared at him, incredulous. "I never seemed to need you?" "Richard, I built my entire life around you. I gave up my career as an interior designer to support yours. I hosted countless dinner parties for your clients, charmed your partners, played the perfect lawyer's wife for 35 years. How can you say I didn't need you? That's different. That's just life, marriage. No, Richard. That was me choosing you every single day, choosing our life together, while you were choosing someone else." The silence stretched between us, heavy with the weight of broken promises and shattered trust. Outside, an owl hooted, its call echoing through the pines. "What happens now?" Richard finally asked. "Now? Now you leave. This is my property, and you're no longer welcome here." "You can't be serious. Where am I supposed to go?" "That's not my problem. Hotel, maybe?" I hear the St. Regis is lovely this time of year. I picked up his weekend bag and handed it to him. Your choice of accommodations is no longer my concern. He stood slowly, looking around the cabin as if seeing it for the last time. And us? Our marriage? Our marriage ended the moment you decided to bring another woman into my family's home. The divorce papers will be filed Monday morning. Margaret, please, think about what you're doing. The scandal, the gossip. What will people say? I almost laughed at his concern for appearances. People will say that Richard Thompson is a fool who threw away a good woman for a cheap thrill. They'll say that Maggie Thompson finally woke up and realized she deserved better, and they'll be right. He gathered his things, moving like a man in a dream. At the door, he paused. I do love you, in my way. Your way wasn't enough, Richard. It never was. After he left, Carol and I sat by the dying fire, sharing a bottle of wine I'd found in the kitchen. Ironically, one Richard had probably brought for his romantic weekend. You handled that beautifully, Carol said, squeezing my hand. I feel like I'm falling apart inside. That's normal. You've just dismantled your entire life. It's okay to grieve. I looked around the cabin, seeing past the evidence of Richard and Brenda's intrusion to the memories layered beneath. This place saved me tonight. If Dad hadn't insisted on keeping it in my name, your father was a smart man. He tried to warn me about Richard, before the wedding. Said he was too smooth, too focused on appearances. I thought Dad was just being overprotective. We see what we want to see when we're young. I nodded, sipping my wine. What do I do now, Carol? I'm 62 years old. I've been Mrs. Richard Thompson for so long, I'm not sure I remember how to be just Maggie. Then it's time to find out. The next morning, I woke early and walked through the cabin, reclaiming each room. I stripped the beds, opened all the windows to let the mountain air cleanse the space, and removed every trace of the previous night's invasion. In the master bedroom, I found a bottle of Brenda's perfume on the dresser. I poured it down the sink, watching the expensive liquid swirl away. By noon, the cabin felt like mine again. Carol and I spent the afternoon hiking the familiar trails of my childhood, breathing in the crisp autumn air. The aspens were at their peak, creating a canopy of gold above us. I'm thinking of moving here, I said suddenly, surprising myself. To Aspen? Full-time? Why not? I never liked Denver that much anyway. Only stayed because of Richard's practice. I gestured to the mountains surrounding us. This is where I'm happiest, where I feel most like myself. What about Jessica? The grandchildren? They can visit. It's only 3 hours away. Besides, Jessica's been saying she wants the kids to spend more time in nature. Carol smiled. I think it's a brilliant idea. Fresh start in a place that's truly yours. That evening, I called Jessica. She answered on the first ring, her voice tight with worry. Mom, where are you? Dad came home last night looking like death. He won't tell me what happened. I'm in Aspen. At the cabin. Sit down, sweetheart. We need to talk. I told her everything. The affair, the emails, the confrontation. The silence on the other end stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Jessica, I'm going to kill him, she said finally, her voice shaking with rage. How could he do this to you, to us? Honey, this is between your father and me. You don't have to choose sides. The hell I don't. He brought his mistress to Grandpa's cabin? To the place where we scattered his ashes? I'm done with him. Jessica. No, Mom. I knew something was off. The way he's been acting, the late nights. I should have pushed harder, should have. This isn't your fault, sweetheart. None of this is your fault. I heard her take a deep breath. What can I do? How can I help? Just be there for your kids. They're going to need stability while your father and I sort this out. Are you okay? Really? I looked out at the mountains, painted purple by the setting sun. I will be. I'm thinking of moving to the cabin permanently. Good. It's where you belong. The kids and I will visit every weekend if you'll have us. Always. After we hung up, I sat on the porch my grandfather had built, wrapped in one of my grandmother's quilts, and watched the stars appear one by one. The night was silent, except for the whisper of wind through the pines and the distant call of a coyote. My phone buzzed with a text from Richard. "We need to talk, please." I deleted it without responding. There would be time for lawyers and mediators, for dividing assets and signing papers. But tonight, I just wanted to sit in the peace of my family's cabin and remember who I was before I became Mrs. Richard Thompson. Monday morning arrived crisp and clear. Carol had returned to Denver the previous day, but I decided to stay in Aspen for the week. I drove into town and found myself walking into the office of Sarah Mitchell, a local attorney I'd met at various social functions over the years. "Maggie Thompson," she said, rising to shake my hand. "What brings you to my office?" "I need a divorce lawyer, and I want the best." Her eyebrows rose. "Richard? You know him. We've crossed paths professionally. Brilliant attorney, but—" She paused diplomatically. "But an arrogant ass who thinks he's God's gift to the legal profession?" Sarah laughed. "I was going to say challenging personality, but your description works too." We spent the morning reviewing my situation. I showed her the deed to the cabin, the screenshots of Richard's emails, and the financial documents I'd quietly been gathering for weeks. "This is impressively thorough," Sarah said, flipping through the papers. "You've done your homework." I had a good teacher. Richard always said to never enter a negotiation unprepared. "Ironic that you're using his own advice against him." She made several notes. "The cabin is clearly yours, no question there. The house in Denver will be more complicated, but given the evidence of his infidelity, we have strong leverage." "I don't want the Denver house," I said, surprising her. "Too many memories. I want to sell it and split the proceeds. What I do want is my fair share of his retirement accounts and investment portfolio." "That's reasonable. What about alimony?" "I don't want his money going forward. I want a clean break. But I do want compensation for the 35 years I spent supporting his career while sacrificing my own." Sarah nodded approvingly. "Smart approach. We can structure a settlement that gives you a lump sum rather than ongoing payments. Cleaner. That way." We spent another hour discussing strategy before I left her office feeling lighter than I had in months. The weight of uncertainty was lifting, replaced by a sense of purpose and direction. That afternoon, I visited a local real estate office. If I was going to make Aspen my permanent home, I needed to think about practicalities. The cabin was perfect for weekends and summers, but it wasn't winterized for year-round living. Mrs. Thompson, the agent, an energetic woman named Patricia, greeted me. "I've been hoping you'd come in. I have several properties that might interest you." "You have?" She smiled. "Small town. Word travels fast. I heard about you and Richard." I stiffened, but she waved her hand dismissively. "Don't worry, I'm firmly Team Maggie. Richard showed my friend's daughter around town last month, if you know what I mean. We've all been wondering when you'd wake up and smell the coffee." Apparently, I needed the coffee thrown in my face first. Patricia laughed and pulled out several listings. "Let's find you something spectacular, something that says new beginning with style." We spent the afternoon touring properties. There was a modern condo near the ski lifts, a Victorian house in the West End, and a stunning contemporary home perched on Red Mountain with views that took my breath away. "This is the one," I said, standing on the deck of the contemporary house, looking out at the valley below. "It feels like standing on top of the world." "It's pricey," Patricia warned, "but with the equity from your Denver house and the settlement you'll likely get. I'll take it. Pending the divorce settlement, of course." "Of course, but something tells me you're going to come out of this just fine." That evening, as I sat in the cabin making lists and plans, my phone rang. Richard again. This time, I answered, "What do you want, Richard?" "Margaret, please, we need to talk. I made a terrible mistake." "Several, actually. But what's your point?" "I want to come home, to work things out. Brenda means nothing to me." "Funny, that's not what your emails said." I was confused, having some kind of crisis. "But losing you has made me realize what's truly important." I almost laughed. "Losing me? Richard, you didn't lose me. You threw me away. And now that your mistress has run for the hills and you're facing public humiliation, you want your safety net back. That's not fair." "Fair? You want to talk about fair? Was it fair when you called me old and preoccupied in your emails to Brenda? Was it fair when you planned to install her in my family's cabin? Was it fair when you dismissed 35 years of marriage for a woman who probably can't even remember the Reagan administration?" Silence on the other end. "I've hired a lawyer," I continued. "Sarah Mitchell. You'll be hearing from her tomorrow." "Sarah Mitchell? She's a shark, Margaret. Do we really need to make this ugly?" "You made it ugly the moment you betrayed our marriage. I'm just cleaning up the mess." I hung up before he could respond. Through the window, I could see the last rays of sunlight painting the mountains gold. Tomorrow would bring lawyers and paperwork, difficult conversations and hard decisions. But tonight, I was exactly where I needed to be. In my family's cabin, surrounded by memories of strength and resilience, ready to write the next chapter of my story. The divorce proceedings moved faster than I expected. Richard, perhaps realizing that his position was untenable, agreed to most of my terms without much fight. The Denver house sold within weeks to a tech couple relocating from California, and my share of the proceeds, combined with the settlement, gave me more than enough to purchase the contemporary house on Red Mountain. 3 months after that fateful night at the cabin, I stood in my new living room, watching movers arrange furniture against floor-to-ceiling windows that showcased the entire Roaring Fork Valley. Jessica arrived with Emma and Noah just as the last box was being carried in. "Grandma, this house is like a castle in the sky," Emma exclaimed, pressing her nose against the glass. "Can we see our rooms?" Noah asked, bouncing with excitement. "Of course. I've set up a special space just for you two." As the children raced upstairs, Jessica lingered, studying me with concern. "You look different, Mom. Younger somehow." I smiled, running my hand through my newly styled hair. Amazing what happens when you stop carrying the weight of someone else's expectations. "I'm proud of you," she said quietly. "The way you've handled everything. Dad's been calling me nonstop, wanting me to talk to you, to convince you to reconsider." "And?" "I told him to call his girlfriend instead." "Oh, wait, she dumped him too." Jessica's smile was sharp. "Apparently, Brenda decided she didn't want to be known as the woman who broke up the Thompson marriage. Bad for her career aspirations." We settled onto my new sofa, a modern piece in cream leather that Richard would have hated. He preferred traditional furniture, heavy and dark, that announced wealth and status. I'd chosen everything in this house for comfort and light. "He showed up at my office last week," Jessica continued, "looking terrible. He's aged 10 years in 3 months. Guilt will do that to a person. He kept saying he couldn't understand how everything fell apart so quickly. I told him it didn't fall apart quickly. He spent months systematically destroying it. He just didn't notice until the consequences hit. I poured us both wine from a bottle of local Pinot Noir. Your father always had a blind spot when it came to consequences. In court, he could see 10 moves ahead. In life, he never looked past his immediate desires. David says Dad's been making mistakes at work too. Lost 2 big clients last month." "That's unfortunate," I said, meaning it. Despite everything, I didn't wish Richard professional failure. I just didn't want him in my personal life anymore. Emma and Noah thundered back downstairs, full of excitement about their room with built-in bunk beds and a reading nook overlooking the mountains. Grandma, can we live here forever? Noah asked, climbing onto my lap. You can visit whenever you want. This is your mountain house now, too. That evening, after Jessica and the children left, I sat on my deck watching the alpenglow paint the peaks rose and gold. My phone buzzed with a text from Carol. How's the Queen of the Mountain doing? Getting used to the altitude, I replied, in more ways than one. The next morning, I drove down to town for coffee at a local cafe that had become my regular spot. The owner, Maria, greeted me with a warm smile. Morning, Maggie. Your usual? Please. And one of those cranberry scones. As I waited for my order, I noticed a familiar figure hunched over a laptop in the corner. Thomas Chen, my divorce attorney, caught my eye and waved me over. Maggie, perfect timing. I have news about Richard. Good news or bad news? Depends on your perspective. He's been reaching out to Sarah Mitchell, trying to reopen negotiations. I sat down across from him. On what grounds? He claims emotional distress. Says the divorce terms were agreed to under duress. Duress? He cheated on me, planned to install his mistress in my family property, and I'm the one who caused distress? Thomas chuckled. That's essentially what Sarah told him. She also reminded him that attempting to hide assets during divorce proceedings, which our forensic accountant discovered he tried to do, could result in criminal charges. He tried to hide assets? 2 offshore accounts. Nothing major, but enough to show pattern of deception. Sarah shut him down hard. I felt a surge of gratitude for my legal team. Good. I'm tired of his games. Speaking of games, Thomas said, closing his laptop, I heard you've been taking ski lessons? I laughed. At my age? Yes. Decided if I'm going to live in Aspen full-time, I should actually learn to ski properly. Not just the bunny slopes Richard always insisted were sufficient for me. Good for you. My wife teaches at Aspen Mountain. I could arrange private lessons if you're interested. That would be wonderful. As I left the cafe, I reflected on how different my life had become. In Denver, my days had revolved around Richard's schedule, his preferences, his needs. Now, I was creating my own rhythm, discovering interests I'd suppressed for decades. The ski lessons became a metaphor for my new life. The first time I stood at the top of an intermediate run, my instructor, Diane, sensed my hesitation. It's just like starting over, she said. The mountain doesn't care about your past, only about this moment, this turn. I pushed off, wobbly at first, then finding my balance. By the end of the run, I was laughing with exhilaration. That evening, I called Jessica. I skied buttermilk today, the whole mountain, not just the beginner area. Mom, that's amazing. Dad always said you were too timid for real skiing. Your father said a lot of things that weren't true. I'm learning that now. Winter settled over Aspen like a down comforter, transforming the valley into a snow globe scene. I embraced the season with unexpected enthusiasm, joining a book club, taking art classes, and even volunteering at the local animal shelter. Each activity felt like reclaiming a piece of myself I'd forgotten existed. One snowy December morning, as I sorted through holiday decorations in my new home, the doorbell rang. I opened it to find Richard standing on my doorstep, snow dusting his shoulders, looking older and somehow smaller than I remembered. Hello, Margaret. Richard, what are you doing here? I was in town for a client meeting. Thought I'd stop by, see your new place. He looked past me into the soaring great room. It's not what I expected. What did you expect? Chintz and doilies? He had the grace to look embarrassed. May I come in? Just for a moment? Against my better judgment, I stepped aside. He entered, taking in the contemporary furnishings, the abstract art on the walls, the absence of anything that resembled our former life together. You've changed, he said finally. No, Richard. I've just stopped pretending to be someone I'm not. He walked to the windows, staring out at the view. I drove by the cabin on my way up, saw smoke from the chimney. Are you renting it out? Jessica and David are using it this week, bringing the kids up for Christmas. Christmas. He turned to face me. Margaret, I made a terrible mistake. Brenda was. She was a symptom, not the cause. I see that now. I was scared of getting older, of becoming irrelevant. She made me feel powerful again. And I didn't? You were always so competent, so self-assured. You didn't need me. I laughed, but not unkindly. Richard, I needed you desperately. But needing isn't the same as being dependent. I needed a partner, not a savior. Someone to share life with, not someone to define it for me. I understand that now. Too late, but I understand. He looked around again. You're happy here. It wasn't a question, but I answered anyway. I am. For the first time in years, I wake up excited about the day ahead. I heard you're skiing and taking art classes. News travels fast. Small town. Plus, Jessica mentioned it. She seems different with me now. Distant. You hurt? Her too, Richard. She idolized you, and you showed her that even heroes can be selfish and cruel. He winced. I never meant to hurt anyone. But you did. Intentions don't erase actions. We stood in awkward silence until Richard cleared his throat. I should go. I just wanted to see. To make sure you were okay. I'm more than okay. I'm finally living my life instead of yours. At the door, he paused. For what it's worth, Margaret, I did love you. I just lost sight of what that meant. I know, but sometimes love isn't enough. Sometimes you need respect, honesty, and the courage to grow together instead of apart. After he left, I stood at my windows watching his rental car navigate the snowy drive. I felt neither satisfaction nor sadness, just a quiet acceptance. Richard and I had shared 35 years, raised a daughter, built a life. But that chapter was closed now, and I was writing a new one. That evening, I hosted my first dinner party in the new house. Carol had flown in from Denver, along with several new friends I'd made in Aspen. Maria from the cafe, Diane, my ski instructor, Patricia, the real estate agent who'd become a close confidant, and Sarah Mitchell, who'd transitioned from my attorney to my friend. As we gathered around my dining table sharing wine and stories, Patricia raised her glass. To Maggie, who proves that the best revenge is living well. Not revenge, I corrected. Recovery, rediscovery, renaissance. Whatever you call it. Carol said, You're glowing. I haven't seen you this happy since college. That's because I haven't been this happy since college. Before I started shrinking myself to fit someone else's idea of who I should be. Sarah leaned forward. You know what I find fascinating? How many women I see in my practice who've lost themselves in their marriages. They come to me for divorces, but what they're really seeking is permission to exist again. Permission? We shouldn't need, Diane added, but somehow do. The cabin gave me that permission, I mused. When I held that deed, remembered my father's words about needing something that was just mine, I realized I'd given away too much of myself, not just to Richard, but to the idea of being the perfect wife, the perfect mother, the perfect woman. And now? Maria asked. Now I'm perfectly imperfect and perfectly fine with that. Later, after my guests had left and I was cleaning up, my phone rang. Jessica. Mom, I just wanted to check in. Dad stopped by earlier, really upset. Said he'd been to see you. He was here briefly. Seemed lost. He is lost. David says he talks about you constantly at work. Not about Brenda or the divorce, just about you. What you're doing, how you've changed. It's like he's finally seeing who you really are. Shame it took losing me to gain that vision. Do you ever think about taking him back? I paused, considering. No, not because I hate him, but because I've grown beyond what we were. I can't shrink back down to fit that life again. I understand. And Mom, I'm really proud of you. You're showing Emma that women don't have to disappear in their marriages. That's a lesson worth everything we've been through. After we hung up, I made myself tea and settled into my reading nook, watching snow fall silently outside. On the coffee table lay a stack of college brochures. At 62, I was considering finishing the art degree I'd abandoned when I married Richard. The thought both terrified and thrilled me. My phone buzzed with a text from Thomas Chen. Heard Richard was in town. Everything okay? Everything's perfect, I replied. Just tying up loose ends. The next morning brought a surprise visitor. Brenda Walsh stood at my door, looking decidedly less polished than the last time I'd seen her. Her designer coat was the same, but her confidence was gone. Mrs. Thompson? Maggie? I hope you don't mind. I was in Aspen and thought I needed to apologize, properly. I studied her for a moment, then stepped aside. Come in, it's cold out there. She entered hesitantly, as if expecting a trap. I led her to the kitchen and poured coffee without asking if she wanted any. Sometimes the rituals of hospitality bridge awkward gaps. I didn't know, she began, wrapping her hands around the mug. About the cabin, about your father. Richard made it seem like you didn't care anymore. About him, about anything. And you believed him? I wanted to. It made what we were doing seem less terrible. She looked up, her eyes red-rimmed. I've lost everything because of this. My job, my reputation. My parents won't speak to me. My roommate asked me to move out because she doesn't trust me around her boyfriend. Consequences have a way of catching up with us. I know, and I deserve all of it. But I wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Truly. I've never been the other woman before. I convinced myself it was love, that Richard was trapped in a dead marriage. But that night at the cabin, seeing your family photos, hearing about your father, she trailed off. You realized you were part of destroying something real. Yes, and now I can't stop thinking about my own parents. They've been married 40 years. What if someone did to my mother what I did to you? I sipped my coffee, letting her sit with that thought. Finally, I said, Brenda, you're young. This mistake doesn't have to define your life. Learn from it. Grow from it. But don't wallow in it. How can you be so calm about this? So forgiving? I'm not forgiving, not entirely. But I'm not angry anymore either. Anger takes energy I'd rather spend on building my new life. She nodded slowly. Richard's miserable, you know. He calls me sometimes late at night, drunk. Says losing you was the biggest mistake of his life. Richard's problem is that he only values things once they're gone. The cabin, our marriage, probably you too. He's like a child who breaks his toys and then cries because they're broken. You're different than I imagined. Stronger. I smiled. I'm different than I imagined, too. This whole experience has taught me that I'm capable of far more than I knew. Maybe you'll discover the same thing. After Brenda left, I felt an unexpected lightness. Her apology hadn't been necessary, but it closed a circle somehow. I spent the afternoon in my studio, a converted bedroom with north-facing windows, working on a painting of the view from my grandfather's cabin. Art had become my therapy, my meditation, my way of processing the seismic shifts in my life. That evening, I attended a gallery opening in downtown Aspen. One of my art classmates was showing her work, and I'd promised to come. As I moved through the crowd, glass of wine in hand, I felt someone watching me. Turning, I found a distinguished man with silver hair and kind eyes studying me with interest. You're Maggie Thompson, he said, extending his hand. I'm James Whitmore. I own the gallery. Nice to meet you. I've heard about your work from Susan at the Art Institute. She says you have remarkable talent for someone who claims to be a beginner. I laughed. I studied art in college years ago, just picking it back up now. Well, when you're ready to show your work, I'd love to see it. There's something compelling about artists who come to their craft later in life. They bring depth, experience, stories worth telling. We talked for nearly an hour about art, life, and the courage it takes to start over. James was widowed, he told me, and had moved to Aspen from New York 5 years ago to escape memories and find new purpose. It's terrifying, isn't it? He said. Rebuilding yourself from scratch, but also exhilarating. Like skiing a black diamond run for the first time, I agreed. Scary as hell, but the view from the bottom is worth every moment of panic. As the evening wound down, James invited me to dinner the following week. Just friends, he clarified quickly. I'm not ready for anything more, and I suspect you aren't either. Friends sounds perfect, I said, meaning it. The last thing I needed was romantic complications, but new friendships? Those were welcome. Walking home through the snowy streets, I reflected on how full my life had become. 6 months ago, I'd been sleepwalking through my days, maintaining a facade of perfect marriage while dying inside. Now, every day brought new challenges, new discoveries, new reasons to be grateful for the courage to change. My phone rang as I reached my door. Richard again. This time I let it go to voicemail. Whatever he needed to say could wait. Right now, I wanted to stand on my deck, watch the stars emerge over the mountains, and breathe in the crisp mountain air of my new life. The voicemail notification chimed as I settled onto my outdoor sofa, wrapped in a thick blanket. Curious, I played it. Margaret, it's me. I just wanted to tell you. I saw the photo Jessica posted of you skiing. You look happy. Really happy. And I realized I can't remember the last time I saw you smile like that when we were together. I'm sorry for that. For all of it. I hope you find everything you're looking for. Goodbye, Margaret. I deleted the message and looked up at the vast Colorado sky. Somewhere between the cabin confrontation and this moment, Richard had finally understood what he'd lost. Not just a wife, but a woman with dreams, ambitions, and a spirit he'd never bothered to truly know. The stars seemed especially bright that night, and I made a wish on the first one I saw. Not for love or revenge or even success, just for the continued courage to be myself, fully and unapologetically, for whatever time I had left. My new life wasn't perfect. There were lonely moments, times when I missed the familiar rhythms of my old existence. But loneliness felt different now, like solitude I'd chosen rather than isolation I'd endured. And in that choice, I found freedom. Tomorrow I would paint. Next week I would ski a new mountain. Next month I would start those college courses. And somewhere in all of that living, I would continue to discover who Maggie Thompson really was, separate from titles like wife, mother, or grandmother. Just Maggie. Finally. Wonderfully. Just Maggie. Spring arrived in Aspen with a sudden burst of color, as if the mountains themselves were celebrating my newfound freedom. The snow melted from the valleys first, revealing carpets of wildflowers, blue, columbines, scarlet Indian paintbrush, and golden sunflowers turning their faces to the strengthening sun. I'd never truly appreciated spring in Colorado before. Always too busy with Richard's social calendar or Jessica's family obligations to notice nature's rebirth. But this year, I watched it unfold with the wonder of a child and the wisdom of a woman who finally understood that seasons change, and so can people. 6 months had passed since that fateful night at the cabin when I'd confronted Richard and Brenda. 6 months of discoveries, challenges, and an exhilarating sense of possibility that I hadn't felt since college. My Red Mountain home had transformed, from an empty shell into a reflection of the woman I was becoming. Bright, open, and unapologetically authentic. Gone were Richard's heavy leather sofas and dark mahogany tables, replaced with comfortable seating in shades of cream and blue, locally crafted wood furniture, and walls adorned with art that spoke to me. The mountain estate's spacious third, bedroom had become my studio, with north-facing windows that bathed the space in perfect light for painting. Canvases in various stages of completion leaned against every wall. Landscapes capturing Aspen's ever-changing moods, abstract explorations of emotion, and studies of the cabin that had become my symbol of independence. My hands often bore the cheerful stains of oils and acrylics, badges of honor I wore proudly to town. On this particular April morning, I was working on my largest canvas yet, a panoramic view of the valley as seen from my grandfather's cabin porch. The familiar shapes of the mountains flowed from my brush with surprising ease, as if my hands had always known how to capture their majesty, but had been waiting for permission. The doorbell's chime interrupted my focus. Setting down my palette, I wiped my hands on a cloth and made my way downstairs, leaving colorful fingerprints on the banister, something that would have horrified me in my Denver life, but now made me smile. Evidence of living. Carol stood on my doorstep, excitement evident in her flushed cheeks and bright eyes. "It came," she announced, waving an envelope with an important-looking seal. "What came?" I asked, ushering her inside. "The response from the Aspen Art Institute, the one you applied to last month." My heart skipped. I'd almost forgotten about the application I'd submitted on a whim after my art teacher, Miranda, had insisted I had real talent worth developing. The Aspen Art Institute offered intensive workshops with renowned artists, but competition for spots was fierce. "Well," Carol demanded, thrusting the envelope toward me, "aren't you going to open it?" I took it with trembling fingers, suddenly nervous. What if they rejected me? Then we'll drink that bottle of Barolo I brought and curse their lack of vision. But they didn't reject you. I can feel it. Taking a deep breath, I tore open the envelope and unfolded the letter inside. My eyes scanned the first paragraph, and I felt my knees weaken. "I got in," I whispered, then louder. "I got in. They accepted me into the summer residency program." Carol squealed and threw her arms around me. "I knew it. You're going to be studying with Marcus Whitman. He's a legend." "I can't believe this is happening," I said, sinking onto my sofa. 6 months ago, I was just Richard Thompson's wife. Now I'm an artist, an actual artist with a residency. You were always an artist, Maggie. You just forgot for a while. We opened the Barolo despite the early hour, toasting my acceptance and the new path stretching before me. The program would start in June, 3 months of intensive study, culminating in a group show at the Institute's prestigious gallery. "Richard is going to lose his mind when he hears about this," Carol mused, swirling her wine. "Remember how he used to mock your little hobby?" I did remember. Richard had never been overtly cruel about my interest in art, just dismissive in that particularly cutting way of his. "The wife dabbles in watercolors," he'd say at parties, laughing indulgently, as if I were a child with a coloring book. I'd eventually stopped painting altogether, convinced it was indeed just a frivolous pastime unworthy of serious attention. "I'm not doing this to prove anything to Richard," I said firmly. "This is for me." "Of course it is," Carol agreed. "But you can't tell me there isn't a small, petty part of you that enjoys turning his condescension on its head." I laughed. Maybe a tiny part. The truth was, I'd thought less and less about Richard as the months passed. Our divorce had been finalized without much drama. Sarah Mitchell had been worth every penny of her considerable fee, securing me a settlement that ensured my financial independence for life. Richard had attempted to contest the cabin's exclusion from marital assets, but backed down when faced with the irrefutable evidence of my sole ownership. Jessica had been my bridge to news of Richard's life. She still saw her father regularly, though their relationship had changed. She'd developed a new protectiveness toward me, and a wariness toward him that I never encouraged but understood came from her own disillusionment. "Dad's dating someone," she'd told me during our weekly lunch the previous month. "Oh?" I'd kept my tone neutral, genuinely curious about how I'd feel about this news. "Some financial advisor from his firm," closer to his age this time. Jessica had watched me carefully. Does that bother you? I'd considered the question honestly before answering. No. I hope she makes him happy. And it was true. Whatever anger I'd felt toward Richard had gradually transformed into something like pity mixed with distant fondness. He was a flawed man who'd made terrible choices. But he was also Jessica's father, my grandchildren's grandfather, and someone I'd shared more than 3 decades with. I couldn't hate him without hating parts of my own history. The doorbell rang, again interrupting my thoughts. Carol raised an eyebrow. Popular this morning, aren't we? I opened the door to find Thomas Chen, my divorce attorney, holding a thick folder and looking uncharacteristically concerned. Thomas, this is a surprise. Come in, please. He nodded to Carol before turning to me with professional gravity. I apologize for dropping by unannounced, Maggie, but something's come up that I thought you should know about immediately. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. Is it Richard? Has he filed something new? No, nothing like that. It's about the old house. He meant my childhood home in downtown Aspen, the property I'd sold shortly after the divorce. The developer who purchased it, Golden Peaks Holdings, has run into some serious legal trouble. The CEO's been arrested for fraud, and all their assets have been frozen pending investigation. I sank onto a bar stool at my kitchen counter. What does that mean for the sale? Thomas set the folder down and opened it, revealing legal documents and newspaper clippings. The sale itself isn't in question. Your money is safe. But there's a complication. Among the charges against Golden Peaks is that they were purchasing properties under false pretenses, telling sellers one thing about their plans while intending something completely different. I don't understand. They told me they were going to restore the house and convert it to luxury short-term rentals. According to these documents, Thomas continued, pointing to a planning commission application, they actually intended to demolish it and build a multi-unit complex that would have violated numerous local ordinances. They've been bribing officials to look the other way. Demolish it? My voice broke. That house had been in my family for generations, just like the cabin. I'd only sold it because maintaining 2 properties seemed excessive, and the cabin held the stronger emotional connection. But it's a historic building. It should be protected. It should be, Thomas agreed. But the designation was never officially filed. Your father started the paperwork years ago but never completed it. Carol, who had been listening quietly, spoke up. What happens to the house now? That's why I'm here, Thomas said, pulling out another document. With the company's assets frozen, the property will likely go to auction to help pay creditors and fines. But there's a legal provision that gives the original seller the right of first refusal if the sale was conducted under fraudulent terms. Meaning I could buy it back? My heart raced at the possibility. Potentially, yes, but it comes with complications. The court would determine a fair market value, which might be higher than what you sold it for. And there would be legal fees, of course. I don't care, I said firmly. That house is part of my family's legacy. I can't let it be torn down. Thomas nodded, understanding in his eyes. I thought you might feel that way. I've already filed a preliminary motion to establish your interest. We have a court date next week. After Thomas left, promising to prepare all necessary documentation, Carol and I sat in thoughtful silence. The house in question was a beautiful Victorian, built by my great-grandfather in Aspen's silver mining heyday. I'd grown up there, playing in its secret nooks and crannies, reading in the window seat that overlooked Main Street, helping my mother tend the heirloom roses that had been transplanted from her family's garden in Boston. What will you do if you get it back? Carol finally asked. I hadn't thought that far ahead, but as she posed the question, an idea began to form. I've been wanting to give back to the community somehow. Maybe it could become an art center, a place where local artists could exhibit, where children could take classes? Maggie Thompson's art house, Carol mused. I love it, and it would be the perfect middle finger to Richard and the wife dabbles in watercolors nonsense. I laughed, but the idea took root and began to grow. By evening, after Carol had left and I'd returned to my painting, the concept had expanded into something tangible and exciting. Not just an art gallery, but a cultural center for the community. Classes for all ages, exhibition space for emerging artists, perhaps even a small cafe where people could gather to discuss ideas. The next day, I called Jessica to tell her about both developments, my acceptance to the Art Institute and the possibility of reclaiming the family home. Mom, that's incredible news. I'm so proud of you. Her voice warmed me through the phone. And the house. I've been feeling guilty about that sale ever since you told me. I always loved that place. Me too. I know it's impractical to maintain 2 properties, but… Mom, stop. You earned this. All of it. Dad was right about one thing when I saw him last week. You've been underestimated your entire life, and now everyone's seeing what we should have recognized years ago. You saw your father? We had lunch. He wanted to show me the new property he's looking at, a cabin in Snowmass. A cabin? Something about this detail unsettled me. Nothing like yours, Jessica quickly clarified. A modern place, all glass and steel. Very Richard. I relaxed. How is he? Lonely, I think. Though he'd never admit it. His new girlfriend seems nice enough, but there's no real connection there. Not like… She trailed off. Not like what we had in the beginning, I finished for her. We did love each other once, very much. I know, Mom. That's what makes all this so sad. We talked a while longer about her children, her work, the upcoming summer plans. Before hanging up, she asked, "Do you ever regret it? The divorce?" "No," I answered without hesitation. I regret that it became necessary. I regret the years I spent disconnected from myself. But I don't regret choosing to live authentically, even if it came late in life. You're inspiring Emma, you know. She told her teacher she wants to be an artist like her grandmother when she grows up. And when Mrs. Peterson asked if she meant a painter, Emma said, "No, I mean brave." Tears pricked my eyes. She said that? She did. David and I nearly burst with pride. After we hung up, I sat on my deck watching the sunset paint the mountains in shades of pink and gold. Emma's words echoed in my mind. I want to be brave like my grandmother. What greater legacy could I hope for? The following week was a whirlwind of preparation. Meetings with Thomas about the house, organizing my portfolio for the Art Institute, and hosting a small dinner party for my expanding circle of Aspen friends. The dinner was a celebration of sorts, marking 6 months since my move to the mountain home. Among the guests was James Whitmore, the gallery owner I'd met at the exhibition months before. Our friendship had developed slowly but steadily through gallery visits and occasional lunches. There was nothing romantic between us. We were both too recently wounded for that. But I valued his artistic insight and dry humor. "This is quite a change from the corporate dinners you used to host," he observed as we stood in my kitchen, preparing the final touches for our meal. I'd decided to cook everything myself rather than catering as I would have in Denver. God, those were soul-sucking affairs, I laughed. All those lawyers and their wives, everyone jockeying for position. Richard would spend days beforehand coaching me on who needed special attention, whose ego needed stroking. And now you're serving homemade lasagna to a sculptor, 2 ski instructors, a gallery owner, and a Buddhist meditation teacher. Quite the social downgrade. His eyes twinkled with amusement. "Best upgrade of my life," I corrected, sliding the garlic bread into the oven. "These people actually talk about things that matter." As if to prove my point, Dinner conversation that evening ranged from local environmental initiatives to the philosophical implications of creating art in a world preoccupied with consumption. We lingered for hours around my reclaimed wood table, drinking wine and sharing stories that had nothing to do with status or appearance. Later, as the last guests were leaving, James helped me clear the dishes. "I have a proposition for you," he said, carefully wrapping leftover tiramisu in foil. "That sounds ominous." "Not at all. The Wilkinson Gallery in Denver is looking for artists to feature in their Colorado Perspectives show this fall. I submitted your portfolio." I nearly dropped the wine glasses I was carrying. "You did what? Without asking me?" "If I'd asked, you would have said no. Because I'm not ready for something like that. Maggie, you've been painting seriously. For what, 6 months? And you're already producing work that artists who've been at it for years would envy. But you're still thinking of yourself as Richard's ex-wife who dabbles. I see you as Maggie Thompson, artist. It's time you did too." I stared at him, momentarily speechless. "The Wilkinson Gallery is a big deal." "Yes, it is. And they want to see more of your work." I told them about your acceptance to the Institute and your plans for the Art Center. They're intrigued by your whole story. My story? You mean the sad tale of a discarded wife finding herself through art? Please tell me you didn't pitch it that way. James shook his head. I told them about a woman who reclaimed her voice after decades of silence. Artists are storytellers, Maggie. Your story gives your work context and power. I considered his words as I rinsed dishes and loaded the dishwasher. My story, not as Richard's ex-wife or Jessica's mother, or even as the woman who confronted her husband's mistress at the cabin, but as someone who had found the courage to pursue long-dormant dreams. It was a narrative I could embrace. All right, I conceded. If they're interested after seeing more work, I'll consider it. James grinned. They've already confirmed your spot. Opening night is October 15th. James, that's 6 months away. Plenty of time to prepare. He handed me a business card with the gallery director's contact information. Call her tomorrow. She's expecting to hear from you. After he left, I sat alone in my living room, turning the card over in my fingers. The old Maggie would have been paralyzed by anxiety at the thought of exhibiting work in a prestigious Denver gallery. But the woman I was becoming felt a thrill of excitement beneath the nerves. I was stepping into uncharted territory, certainly, but wasn't that the point of this new chapter? Before going to bed, I checked my email and found a message from Thomas, Chen with the subject line, "Good news." The court had granted our motion for first right of refusal on the Victorian house. A hearing was scheduled for the following month to determine fair market value. Most importantly, the historical value of the property had been acknowledged, which would make demolition nearly impossible regardless of who ultimately purchased it. I fell asleep that night with a sense of purpose I hadn't felt since those early days of independence. The art residency, the gallery show, the potential recovery of my family home, all pieces of a life I was actively creating rather than merely inhabiting. The court hearing about the house took place on a rainy May morning. I dressed carefully, in a blue suit I'd purchased for the occasion, professional but distinctly my own style, not the conservative designer outfits I'd worn as Richard's wife. Sarah Mitchell accompanied me, as she had more experience with property law than Thomas. The courthouse hummed with activity, but I remained calm and focused. This wasn't about revenge or even justice. It was about preserving something meaningful, both for my family's legacy and for the community. Nervous? Sarah asked as we waited outside the courtroom. Surprisingly, no. I've become quite good at fighting for what matters to me. She smiled approvingly. You certainly have. Richard never knew what hit him. Inside, the judge, a severe-looking woman in her 50s, listened attentively as attorneys for Golden Peaks Holdings argued that despite their clients' legal troubles, The sale had been legitimate and should stand. Sarah countered with evidence of their fraudulent intentions and the historical significance of the property. "Your Honor, this house isn't just another real estate asset," she concluded. "It represents a piece of Aspen's history that deserves preservation." Ms. Thompson sold the property with the understanding that it would be respectfully repurposed, not demolished for profit. The judge asked me to approach. "Ms. Thompson, what are your intentions for the property should the court rule in your favor?" I spoke clearly, my voice steady. "I plan to establish a community art center, Your Honor. A place where local artists can exhibit their work, where children and adults can take classes, and where Aspen's cultural heritage can be celebrated. The house was built by my great-grandfather during Aspen's first Renaissance. I think he would approve of it supporting a new creative renaissance for the town." She nodded thoughtfully. "And you're prepared to pay fair market value as determined by the court?" "I am, Your Honor." After a brief recess, the judge returned with her decision. The sale would be reversed, with me paying the original purchase price plus a 5% fee to cover administrative costs. Given the circumstances, she deemed this fair to all parties. The Golden Peaks representatives looked displeased but resigned. As we left the courthouse, Sarah squeezed my arm. "Congratulations, Maggie. You just saved a piece of history." "And secured my future," I added, thinking of the art center that now felt like more than just a dream. News travels quickly in small towns. By evening, my phone was buzzing with messages from Aspen acquaintances who'd heard about the court's decision. Among them was a text from Richard. "Jessica told me about the house. Well done." I stared at those simple words, trying to discern the sentiment behind them. Was he being sincere? Sarcastic? Some complex blend of emotions that even he couldn't fully articulate? I decided to take them at face value and replied simply, "Thank you." The Victorian's keys were officially returned to me 2 weeks later. I stood on the porch, feeling a strange mix of nostalgia and possibility as I unlocked the ornate front door. Inside, the house was empty, its hardwood floors gleaming in the afternoon light streaming through stained glass transoms. I walked slowly through rooms that held decades of memories. The parlor where I'd practiced piano as a child, the dining room where my parents had hosted community leaders and mining executives, the sunny breakfast nook where my mother had taught me to draw. Each space whispered of past lives, but also hummed with potential. The transformation would require extensive work. The house needed updating to meet modern building codes, especially if it was to become a public space. But the bones were solid, the craftsmanship exceptional, the location ideal for a community center. I made a quick call to Patricia, my real estate agent friend who had helped me find the Red Mountain home. "I need an architect who specializes in historic renovations, someone who understands the balance between preservation and purpose." "I know just the person," she said without hesitation. "Elena Diaz. She restored the Wheeler Opera House facade last year. Everyone thought it was impossible, but she worked magic." Elena arrived at the Victorian the next day, a compact woman with silver-streaked black hair and intelligent eyes behind red-framed glasses. She moved through the house with reverence, running her hands along the original woodwork, examining the ceiling medallions, testing the floorboards for stability. "This place has good energy," she declared after completing her inspection. "It wants to be filled with people again, with creativity." "That's exactly what I was thinking," I said, pleased by her intuitive understanding of my vision. We spent hours discussing possibilities, opening up the main floor for gallery space while preserving architectural details, converting upstairs bedrooms into studios and classrooms, updating the kitchen to serve the cafe area I'd envisioned. Elena sketched as we talked, her pencil bringing my ideas to visual life. "We can maintain the historical integrity while making it functional for your needs," she said, showing me a rough concept drawing. "And sustainable too. Solar panels on the back roof where they won't be visible from the street. efficient heating, and cooling systems hidden within the existing structure. How long would something like this take? 8 months minimum, possibly up to a year, depending on permitting and material availability. And the cost? I held my breath, knowing that historical renovations were notoriously expensive. Elena named a figure that made me wince but wasn't unexpected. Between the settlement from Richard and my own investments, I could manage it, but it would significantly deplete my reserves. Worth every penny, I decided aloud. Let's do it. As Elena packed up her sketches, promising formal plans within 2 weeks, I felt a familiar surge of excitement. The same feeling I'd experienced when confronting Richard at the cabin, when purchasing the Red Mountain home, when applying to the Art Institute. The thrill of moving forward on my own terms. That evening, I called Jessica to share the news about the Victorians' transformation. We're actually going to do it. Create an art center right in the heart of Aspen. That's amazing, Mom. Have you thought about what you'll call it? I had, actually. The name had come to me while standing in my old childhood bedroom, remembering how my father had encouraged my early artistic efforts. Thompson Art Center, I said. Simple, but it honors the family legacy. Perfect, Jessica approved. Dad mentioned you got the house back. He seemed, I don't know, proud in a weird way, like he was taking credit for your backbone. I laughed. That sounds like Richard. He asked if he could see your paintings sometime. Jessica's tone was carefully neutral. I told him I'd ask you. The request surprised me. Why would he want to see my work? I think he's trying to understand who you are now, the woman who walked away and built a new life, the one who didn't crumble without him. I considered this. Part of me wanted to refuse, to keep this precious, newfound part of myself protected from his potential criticism or condescension. But another part recognized that perhaps, in his own way, Richard was also trying to grow. He can come to these opening at the Wilkinson Gallery in October, I decided. If he's genuinely interested, he can see my work alongside everyone else. As spring gave way to early summer, my days fell into a new rhythm defined by purpose rather than obligation. Mornings were spent at the Art Institute, where I worked alongside 15 other artists under Marcus Whitman's often challenging but always insightful tutelage. Afternoons found me at the Victorian, collaborating with Elena on renovation plans, or meeting with potential partners for the art center. Evenings were for my own painting, dinner with friends, or quiet contemplation on my deck, watching the mountains change color with the setting sun. Carol visited often, marveling at each new development in my life. You're barely recognizable. As the woman who hosted those stuffy Christmas parties in Denver, she observed one evening as we shared a bottle of wine on my deck. Remember how you used to stress for weeks about the perfect table settings and whether Richard's senior partners would approve of the canapes? I groaned at the memory. God, I was exhausting. Everything had to be perfect because it was all a reflection on Richard. His house, his wife, his perfect life. And now? I gestured to my paint-splattered jeans and the messy bun that had become my daily hairstyle. Now I'm just me, imperfect and much happier for it. To imperfection, Carol toasted, clinking, her glass against mine. June bloomed into July, bringing warm days and cool mountain evenings. The Art Institute residency intensified, with Marcus pushing me to explore techniques and subjects I'd never attempted. Under his guidance, my work evolved from safe, traditional landscapes to more abstract, emotionally resonant pieces that still reference the natural world, but with greater interpretive freedom. You're finding your voice, he told me after a particularly challenging session where I'd struggled with a complex composition. It's not about technical perfection. You've already got a solid foundation there. It's about saying something only you can say, in a way only you can say it. This insight transformed my approach to painting. I began to see each canvas not just as a reproduction of something external, but as an expression of my internal landscape, my experiences, emotions, perceptions. The mountains became metaphors, the changing seasons reflections of human transitions, the quality of light a language for communicating subtle emotional truths. My fellow residents, most of them decades younger, accepted me without question, interested in my perspective and supportive of my late-blooming artistic journey. We spent evenings critiquing each other's work, sharing techniques, and discussing the role of art in a fractured world. In these conversations, my age and life experience became assets rather than liabilities. Construction at the Victorian began in earnest, with Elena overseeing a team of craftspeople specialized in historical restoration. The transformation was both painstaking and exhilarating to witness. Original details carefully preserved while spaces were reimagined for their new purpose. I visited the site daily, often bringing lunch for the workers and sitting with Elena to review progress and make decisions about everything from lighting fixtures to floor finishes. "You should document this process," Elena suggested one afternoon as we watched workers carefully removing the original crown molding in the parlor so it could be restored and reinstalled. "The rebirth of this house mirrors your own journey. It would make a powerful exhibition for your opening." The idea resonated with me. I began bringing my camera to the site, capturing both the physical transformation of the Victorian and the skilled hands bringing it back to life. These photographs, combined with my paintings, would tell a multi-layered story of reclamation and renewal. In August, I received an unexpected email from Brenda Walsh. Seeing her name in my inbox triggered a momentary flash of anger, quickly replaced by curiosity. The subject line read simply, "Thank you. Dear Maggie," she wrote, "this message is long overdue. I've started and deleted it 100 times, never finding the right words. But after seeing the article about your art residency in the Aspen Times, I finally gathered the courage to reach out. What I did was unforgivable. I could offer excuses, my youth, Richard's manipulation, my own ambition, but none of that matters. The truth is, I hurt you deeply, and for that, I am genuinely sorry. Here's the part that might surprise you. That night at the cabin changed my life. Seeing the dignity with which you handled such a devastating betrayal, witnessing the strength it took to stand up for yourself after years of being undervalued, it forced me to confront some uncomfortable truths about myself and the choices I was making. I left Aspen the next day, resigned from the firm, and moved back to Chicago to be near my sister. I'm in graduate school now, studying social work. I want to help women find their voices before they lose decades to silence, as you did. I don't expect forgiveness, nor am I asking for it. I simply wanted you to know that your courage that night had ripple effects you never intended. You showed me what real strength looks like, and I'll carry that lesson forward in my work. Congratulations on your art career and all you've accomplished. You deserve every success. Sincerely, Brenda Walsh. I sat with the email open for a long time, emotions swirling through me like paint and water. There was a strange comfort in knowing that something positive had emerged from that painful confrontation, that my moment of reclaiming my power had somehow helped another woman find hers. After careful consideration, I replied, "Brenda, thank you for your email. While I can't say I've forgotten what happened, I do appreciate your apology, and I'm glad to hear you've found a meaningful path forward. We all make mistakes. The important thing is what we learn from them and how we grow. I wish you well in your studies and future career. Maggie." As I clicked send, I felt a knot of tension I hadn't even realized I was carrying finally release. The last threads of bitterness dissolved, leaving only the clear-eyed perspective that comes with genuine healing. That same week brought another surprising communication, an invitation from the Denver Art Museum to participate in a panel discussion titled "Late Bloomers: Finding Artistic Voice in the Second Half of Life." The event would coincide with my exhibition at the Wilkinson Gallery, creating a perfect opportunity to introduce my work to a wider audience. "You have to do it," James insisted when I called to consult him. "This is major recognition, Maggie. The Denver Art Museum doesn't invite just anyone to speak. But I'm so new to all this. What insights could I possibly offer?" "Are you kidding? Your whole story is the insight. You're living proof that it's never too late to reclaim your passion, that creativity doesn't have an expiration date." His words echoed in my mind as I drove to the Victorian later that day. Was that truly my story? Not the betrayal, not the divorce, but the reclamation of a creative self long suppressed? The narrative felt right, resonating with the person I was, becoming rather than defining me by what I'd lost. I accepted the invitation. September arrived with the first hint of fall in the air, aspens beginning their golden transformation, mornings crisp enough for sweaters, the quality of light shifting to a warmer, more golden hue. The Art Institute residency culminated in a group exhibition that drew impressive crowds to the campus gallery. Marcus positioned my work prominently, a series of 5 large canvases I'd titled Thresholds. Each painting depicted a mountain scene in different seasonal light, but with abstract elements suggesting psychological transitions. Doorways half glimpsed in forest shadows, paths disappearing into mist, windows floating in impossible spaces. The technical skill showed my progress over the intense summer, but it was the emotional resonance that garnered attention. "These are remarkable," an elderly gentleman told me during the opening reception. "They capture something universal about moments of decision, the courage it takes to step from the known into the unknown." "That's exactly what I was trying to express," I said, pleased by his perception. "We all face thresholds in life," he continued. "But few of us recognize them. Until we've already crossed. You've made them visible. That's a true gift to your viewers." His words stayed with me long after the exhibition ended. I'd been painting my own experience, certainly, but in doing so, I'd tapped into something more universal: the human journey of change and growth, of leaving behind outgrown versions of ourselves to step into new possibilities. 3 of my paintings sold that evening, an unexpected validation that left me both thrilled and slightly bereft. Marcus noticed my mixed emotions as I watched the red, sold dots being placed beside my work. "It's always bittersweet, the first time you sell a piece," he observed. "Like sending a child out into the world." "Exactly. I put so much of myself into these paintings. It feels strange knowing they'll hang in strangers' homes." That's the beauty of it, though. Your personal expression becomes part of someone else's life, their daily experience. You've made a connection that transcends the usual boundaries between people. This perspective transformed my feelings about the sales. Rather than losing pieces of myself, I was extending my reach, creating connections through art that wouldn't otherwise exist. As September progressed, final preparations for the Wilkinson Gallery show consumed my attention. James helped curate the selection, ensuring a cohesive narrative that showcased both my technical growth and thematic development. We decided on 15 pieces, including 3 from the Threshold series and several new works specifically created for this exhibition. The show's title, Late Light, came from a conversation with Jessica while we hiked near the cabin one evening. The sun was setting, casting that magical golden hour illumination that photographers and painters chase. "The light's different. Now," Jessica observed as we paused to admire the landscape. "Not as bright as midday, but somehow richer, more nuanced. Late light tells better stories." "Late light," I repeated, struck by the metaphor. That's exactly how I feel about this chapter of my life. Not as bright as youth maybe, but richer, more interesting. Mom, that's perfect for your show title. Late Light, The Art of Maggie Thompson. The phrase captured everything I wanted to express, that there is beauty and value in life's later chapters, that some things can only be fully appreciated. With time and perspective, that illumination comes in many forms throughout our journey. 2 weeks before the Denver opening, I received an unexpected call from Richard. We hadn't spoken directly in months, communicating only through brief text messages about practical matters when necessary. Seeing his name on my caller ID sent an involuntary flutter through my stomach, not longing exactly, but muscle memory from decades of emotional entanglement. "Maggie," he said when I answered, his voice more hesitant than I'd ever heard it. "I hope I'm not interrupting anything important." "Just working on a painting for the Denver show," I replied, keeping my tone neutral. "What can I do for you, Richard?" He cleared his throat. "Jessica told me about your exhibition and the panel at the Denver Art Museum." "That's right. I'd like to attend both events, if that wouldn't make you uncomfortable." The request surprised me, though perhaps it shouldn't have. Richard had always been drawn to success, to association with accomplishment. Was this merely another manifestation of that tendency, a desire to connect himself to my newfound recognition? "Why?" I asked simply. The silence stretched so long I wondered if we'd been disconnected. Finally, he sighed. "Because I need to understand." "Understand what?" "How I could have lived with you for 35 years and never seen what you were capable of, what I missed by not truly seeing you." His admission struck me with unexpected force. This wasn't the Richard I knew, the confident lawyer who never acknowledged weakness, who twisted every situation to his advantage. This was someone reflective, perhaps even remorseful. "The Denver opening is public," I said finally. "You're welcome to attend. As for the panel discussion, I'll put your name on the guest list." "Thank you, Maggie." Another silence fell between us, weighted with decades of shared history and recent pain. "Is there something else, Richard?" "I saw the article about the Victorian, about your plans for the art center." His voice had regained some of its familiar authority. "It's an ambitious project. Have you secured all the funding?" The question irritated me. "My finances are no longer your concern." I know. He backpedaled quickly. "I didn't mean to overstep. It's just, the Thompson name will be on that building. Jessica and the grandchildren carry that name too. I'd like to contribute if you'd allow it. Anonymously, of course." I nearly laughed aloud at the irony. Richard, who had dismissed my artistic interests for decades, now wanted to fund an arts center bearing our family name. Yet beneath my cynicism, I recognized a genuine opportunity, both for the center's financial security and, perhaps, for a different kind of closure between us. "I'll think about it," I conceded. "Send a proposal. To my lawyer if you're serious." "I will, and Maggie, I'm proud of you, for what that's worth." After hanging up, I stood motionless in my studio, brush suspended over canvas, processing the conversation. Richard's words seemed sincere, yet I'd learned not to trust appearances where he was concerned. Still, people could change. Wasn't my own transformation evidence of that possibility? I called Jessica that evening to share the conversation. "Your father wants to contribute to the arts center, anonymously. What do you think his angle is?" "Maybe he doesn't have one," she suggested. "Dad's been different lately. More introspective, less certain of himself. Our last few lunches, he's actually asked about my work, my thoughts. Really listened, not just waited for his turn to speak." That doesn't sound like Richard. I know. It's like watching a glacier melt. Glacially slow, but definitely happening. "Oh, and he broke up with the financial advisor." This detail shouldn't have mattered to me, but I found myself asking, why? He said, and I quote, "She reminds me of who I was trying to be, not who I want to become." Whatever that means. The cryptic statement lingered in my thoughts as I returned to my painting. What version of himself was Richard trying to leave behind? And what did he aspire to? Become? 3 days later, Thomas Chen called to inform me that Richard had indeed submitted a proposal, a generous endowment for the Thompson Arts Center, with no strings attached and no public recognition required. The amount would ensure the center's operational costs for the first 5 years, allowing us to offer scholarships and free programming for underserved communities. It's a legitimate offer, Thomas assured me. I've gone through it with a fine-tooth comb. No hidden clauses, no ways for him to exert control. What do you think his motivation is? Thomas considered this. In my experience, people usually donate to arts organizations for 3 reasons: tax benefits, social prestige, or genuine belief in the mission. Since he's insisting on anonymity, we can rule out the social angle. Given the structure of the donation, the tax benefits aren't particularly impressive. That leaves genuine commitment to what you're building. Or guilt, I added. Or guilt, Thomas acknowledged. But does the motivation matter if the result benefits the community? He had a point. After consulting with Elena and the board of directors I'd begun assembling for the center, I accepted Richard's contribution with a formal letter of thanks, but no personal communication. October arrived with a spectacular display of fall colors and mounting excitement about the Denver exhibition. The final selection of paintings was crated and transported to the Wilkinson Gallery, where the installation took place under James's expert supervision. Meanwhile, I prepared for the panel discussion, organizing my thoughts about finding artistic voice later in life. The night before we left for Denver, Carol, Jessica, and I gathered at my home for a quiet celebration. The fire crackled in the stone hearth, warming us against the autumn chill as we shared a meal I'd prepared, another skill I'd reclaimed in my post-Richard life. I can't believe how much has changed in a year, Jessica mused, swirling her wine thoughtfully. Last October, we were having that awful birthday dinner where Dad berated you about the Washington trip. The memory, once painful, now felt distant, almost as if it had happened to someone else. That feels like a lifetime ago. You were so quiet that night, Jessica continued. I knew something was wrong, but I didn't really see you. None of us did. I didn't really see myself, I admitted. Not clearly, anyway. Carol raised her glass. To clarity, and to the magnificent woman who emerged when the fog finally lifted. We clinked glasses, the crystal ringing with promise and celebration. Later, after Jessica had gone home to her family and Carol had retired to the guest room, I stood on my deck beneath a canopy of stars. The mountains loomed as dark silhouettes against the night sky, solid and eternal, reminding me of my own inner strength, the foundation that had always been there, waiting to be recognized. Denver felt different when we arrived the next day. Still, familiar but no longer intimidating. I'd spent decades navigating its social hierarchies as Richard's wife, always conscious of appearances and connections. Now I moved through the city with the confidence of a woman defined by her own accomplishments. The Wilkinson Gallery had transformed in preparation for the opening. My paintings, professionally lit and thoughtfully arranged, created a narrative journey through the space. James had insisted on including 2 early pieces from before my marriage, works I'd rediscovered in the cabin's attic, to provide context for the artistic voice I was reclaiming. It's about the journey, he explained, as we toured the installation. These early works show your natural talent and original vision. Then we have this gap, decades without painting, followed by the explosion of creativity this past year. It tells a powerful story. The story resonated even more strongly at the Denver Art Museum panel later that afternoon. Seated alongside 3 other late bloomer artists, a poet who published her first collection at 70, a sculptor who began his career after retirement, and a digital artist who found her medium in her 50s. I shared my experience of rediscovering creativity after years of suppression. For me, painting isn't just about making images, I told the audience. It's about reclaiming a voice I'd silenced to meet others' expectations. Every brushstroke is an act of self-recognition, of saying, this is what I see. This is how I feel. This matters. From my seat on the stage, I spotted Richard in the third row, listening intently, his expression uncharacteristically open. Jessica sat beside him, occasionally glancing his way with a mixture of surprise and approval. Our eyes met briefly across the auditorium, not as former spouses, but as two people acknowledging each other's humanity. After the panel, as attendees, mingled with refreshments, Richard approached me hesitantly. He'd aged visibly since our confrontation at the cabin, his hair grayer, lines deeper around his eyes and mouth. But there was something else different too, a softening of the rigid self-assurance that had defined him. That was illuminating, he said, maintaining a respectful distance. You spoke beautifully. Thank you for coming. Maggie, He stopped, seeming to struggle with words, something I'd rarely witnessed in our marriage. I want to apologize, not just for Brenda, though certainly for that betrayal, but for the years before, for not seeing who you really were, for not supporting your gifts. I studied him, searching for the manipulation that had often underlay his apologies during our marriage. Instead, I found what appeared to be genuine remorse. Why now, Richard? What's changed? He looked down, collecting his thoughts. After you left, after the divorce, I was angry. Blamed you for everything. But then I saw you thriving without me, building this new life that was so clearly more authentic than anything we'd had together. It forced me to look at myself, really. Look, for maybe the first time. And what did you see? A man who'd spent his life curating an image instead of developing character. Someone who valued possession over partnership, appearance over substance. He met my eyes directly. I didn't just lose you, Maggie. I lost myself somewhere along the way. I'm trying to find my way back to something real. The gallery opening that evening was a triumph beyond my expectations. Art critics, collectors, and curious Denver Society members filled the space, engaging deeply with my work. 3 paintings sold within the first hour, red dots appearing beside them like badges of honor. James moved through the crowd, ensuring key individuals saw specific pieces, while Carol appointed herself my unofficial bodyguard, rescuing me from overly lengthy conversations when needed. Richard arrived midway through the event, staying on the periphery, observing rather than inserting himself as he would have in the past. When we eventually crossed paths near a large canyon landscape, he spoke not about himself, but about the painting. This reminds me of that hike we took in Utah, the first year we were married, before Jessica was born. Do you remember? You wanted to sketch the rock formations, but I was impatient to reach the summit. I remember, I said, surprised he'd retained that detail. You said we could come back another time, but we never did. One of many promises I broke. He studied the painting with genuine interest. You've captured that light perfectly, the way it changes the color of the stone depending on the time of day. I always envied that about you, your ability to really see things. You envied me? I never knew. There's a lot we never knew about each other, isn't there? His smile held sadness but no bitterness. I'm trying to learn from that, to see people clearly, including myself. As the evening wound down, Jessica joined us, pride evident in her expression. Mom, 3 more paintings just sold, and the director of that gallery in Santa Fe wants to talk to you about a show next spring. It's overwhelming, I admitted. A year ago, I couldn't have imagined any of this. I could have, Richard said quietly, if I'd been paying attention. The 3 of us stood together in a moment of peculiar harmony. Not the restoration of what was lost, but the recognition of something new emerging from its ashes. A family reconfigured, relationships redefined, but still connected by threads of shared history and mutual care. Later that night, back in my hotel room, I sat at the desk and began a letter to my younger self, the woman who had silenced her own voice to amplify her husband's, who had forgotten her own dreams while nurturing everyone else's. I wrote of forgiveness, not just for Richard, but for myself. For the choices made from fear rather than courage. For the years spent hiding instead of shining. You were always an artist, I wrote. Always a woman of substance and vision. The canvas was waiting for your return. And now, finally, you are painting your own masterpiece. Your life, lived authentically, unapologetically, completely. The Thompson Art Center opened the following spring, a beautiful integration of historical preservation and contemporary function. The Victorians' original character had been maintained while creating flexible spaces for exhibitions, classes, and community events. The grand opening drew visitors from across Colorado, with the governor cutting the ceremonial ribbon and praising the center as a model of cultural investment in smaller communities. Richard attended without fanfare, just another community member supporting the arts. When our paths crossed in the rehabilitated parlor, now a gallery showcasing emerging local artists, he commented simply, "You've created something extraordinary here, Maggie. Something that will outlast both of us." "We've created it," I corrected, acknowledging his financial contribution for the first time. "Thank you for making it possible." The money was the easy part. The vision, the heart of this place. That's all you. As I watched him move through the crowd, I realized we had both found freedom in unexpected ways. I'd escaped a marriage that diminished me, certainly, but Richard had been liberated too. From the exhausting performance of perfection, from the shallow values that had guided his choices for decades. In the years that followed, my life expanded in ways I could never have anticipated. The Art Center flourished, becoming a cultural hub for Aspen and surrounding communities. My painting career developed steadily, with exhibitions across the country and eventually internationally. The cabin remained my sanctuary, a place to reconnect with my roots and the catalyst for my transformation. Richard and I established a new kind of relationship, not friendship exactly, but a respectful alliance centered around Jessica and our grandchildren. He never remarried, instead focusing on mentoring young attorneys and serving on nonprofit boards, including, eventually, at my invitation, the Art Center's board of directors. On the 5th anniversary of the center's opening, I unveiled a new exhibition titled Full Circle. The centerpiece was a triptych depicting the cabin in 3 different lights: dawn, midday, and dusk, symbolizing the phases of a woman's life. Before the gathered crowd, I spoke about journeys that seemed to end but actually lead to new beginnings. 5 years ago, I stood at a threshold, I told the audience. Behind me lay decades of silence, of living smaller than my spirit demanded. Ahead stretched the unknown, terrifying but alive with possibility. Crossing that threshold required courage, yes, but also the recognition that we are never too old, too established, or too defined by our past to choose a different future. As applause filled the converted Victorian parlor, I caught Richard's eye across the room. He nodded once, acknowledging the truth we both now understood, that sometimes what appears to be an ending is merely the beginning of a more authentic story. That night, alone in my studio at the Red Mountain home, I began a new painting. Not of mountains or cabins or symbolic thresholds, but of a woman standing tall, face lifted to the light, arms open to embrace whatever came next. Behind her stretched the shadow of who she had been, not erased, but integrated, part of the complete picture. I titled it The Real Deed, and signed it with a flourish. Margaret Thompson, artist, creator, finally and completely herself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.